Hello there, we're gonna make a oven French toast today. And I have 10 cups of crusted bread. Croissants work, sourdough mixed with like a French bread would work, really tasty. I have brioche. Brioche is made with a lot of butter. It's very rich. So I've got 10 cups and I've cut it up and I'm not going to worry about the crust being on it. It does make for crunchy bits in this recipe. So I have a buttered pan that I just buttered around the edges. You could spray it if you wanted with a cooking spray. The nice thing about butter is it adds a little bit of flavor to our our casserole, our French toast casserole. So I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna put in all my bread right on top of this buttered area. Now, what I've done is I have toasted, because in my other videos you've probably seen that I like to bring out the flavor in nuts. You just take nuts right out of the bag. Sometimes they don't have the toasted flavor. They have a delicious flavor, but you get more, well, the toasted, it browns them a little bit too. So I love that flavor. So what I've done is I've taken some of my pecans and I put them in a pan behind me and I've toasted them just a little bit. And that just, about 5 minutes on a medium flame. Just make sure that they're not really dark and brown. So I've got my bread in my casserole pan that was buttered. And now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna chop up my pecans and add them to the top of this. So what I do is I just put them on a cutting board and I take my chopper. These are available in the store, and I just put my chopper right on top of an area, and then I just chop them just a little bit. I don't want them really fine because I'd rather have a little bigger pieces. So just a few little chops. You could do this with a knife very easily, but I can already smell the nuts. Just they start to smell in the kitchen actually. So what I'm going to do is I'll move it over here so that I don't drop it on the ground. I'm going to have my bread and I'm going to add these pecans right to the top. Now, as you know, you can leave pecans out of this completely. You can leave all the nuts out of this completely. You don't need to put any nuts in it at all. I've added a little bit more than the recipe calls for. The recipe calls for just a small amount, and I will post that. But I put a few more in because it is going to be a hearty French toast breakfast with a little bit of bacon. I'm going to serve it. So you see all the little nuts? They're just put right on top. All right. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through the recipe with you. I have my eggs here, and I have cracked 5 large eggs, and I've just whisked them up a little bit. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to add to this a few items. I'm going to add my, it only calls for half a teaspoon of cinnamon in the actual recipe, but I usually add a whole teaspoon of cinnamon. We really enjoy it. And then it calls for a 1/4 cup of sugar, just granulated sugar. And I go ahead and I put the cinnamon and the sugar right in with my eggs. Now I go through an extra step here, and the extra step I do is just to ensure that I've gotten all those little pieces of egg that didn't fall in and I don't have any shells. So I like to strain this. So what I do is I go ahead and I take my egg mixture and I put it in through a sieve right over top of a bowl. So I'm gonna go ahead and take my spatula, get all that yummy stuff out of this bowl so nothing is left. And then if you could see this, you'll see that most of it is already dripped through. If there is crunchy parts in your sugar, if there's little stringy white parts in your egg, if there's any egg shells, I just kind of push them right through. Now, this is a step you certainly don't need to take because I was pretty careful when I cracked the eggs. But it is a step that when I have company, for sure, when I cook for somebody else, I always take that extra step because there's nothing more uncomfortable than somebody biting into a shell when you have company. So I'm going to go ahead and put that over there, and that's going to be washed later. So now what I have here is my eggs that have been strained with my sugar and my cinnamon. Now I'm going to add 1½ cups of whole milk. Now, I've added 1½ cups of milk to this, and now I'm going to stir it. And this is going to be my custard that's going to go over top of my bread and my nuts. I'm going to add a pinch of salt, probably as much as a quarter of a teaspoon, because remember, you want to break up some of the sweetness of this. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to pour this all the way on the top of my bread. I'm just going to try to get it all in. Remember, it will soak to the bottom and you'll be able to manipulate it if some of it's still dry. All right, so I'm going to take my spatula and kind of push it down. You can already see the custard at the bottom is just being soaked completely up by the brioche. Now, what we're going to do before we put this in the oven is we're going to drizzle it with butter and a little bit of brown sugar and cinnamon and another pinch of salt. And I'm going to mix this together with my spatula, and it's going to turn into a liquid drizzle. It's very dark brown sugar. You know, you can use a light brown as well. So it comes out, it's well, for lack of a better term, just a brown liquid. That's, you know, brown butter. So I'm going to go ahead and drizzle this all over the top of my casserole. It does bake in, so it's not super important. Try to get a little bit in all the edges, but I'm just drizzling it on. This bakes up very crunchy and crispy, and all the little crusts that you've left on your bread become very crunchy. When this comes out of the oven, I will drizzle it with a white powdered sugar, and not a glaze, but it'll just be like a little dusting. Now this goes in the oven 375. It goes for about 35 minutes. If you put it in for a little bit longer, it does get a little bit crunchier. You just want to dry it out, so watch it closely the last 5 minutes. I'll see you in a little bit. I'll come back and we'll scoop some for you. That's the way it's going in right now. Welcome back. It's out of the oven. It looks yummy. Boy, those nuts are nestled into all those pieces of crust. I'm going to show you what I do to powdered sugar. You can get a really small sieve, but since we're using this anyway, I thought we would use it. I'm going to just dump this in, and I'm going to sprinkle it as I go. So all it does is it distributes it better than if you just poured powdered sugar right on it. It doesn't need to be like a thick coat of it, but it does add some real sweetness to it. Now, I serve this also with real maple syrup. You could serve it with, you know, just plain, just like this, because it's probably fine. I'm going to go ahead, and the pan is a little bit warm still. Let me grab my pot holder, and I'm going to cut a nice, generous serving of this and put it on a plate so you can see what it looks like. It's got a lot of custard, and yet it still has really crispy edges. It's really tender on the inside. I did fry up some thick cut bacon. Goes really good with it. And I would serve it maybe with a side of maple syrup as well. So you can make this thicker if you'd like. You can put it in an 8x8 or 9x9 pan, and it comes out really, really thick. You just need to cook it for longer and keep an eye on it. I made mine so that it would be a little bit thinner. I also made mine with a very fragile dough. Brioche will tend to fall a little bit. If you make it with a sturdier bread like sourdough and French, it's probably going to be a little bit higher. I hope you enjoy this. It will definitely serve a lot of people, and it's a great thing to get at the door during a pandemic when you can't see someone. Deliver some French toast and bacon for breakfast with a bottle of orange juice and see how many friends you make. Take care.